Jim and Dudley, I want to ask if you have something you want to, a comment you want to make or a question you'd like to ask Tony.
Well, I was just going to comment on what you were saying earlier, Tony, about politics and then the spheres. It seems to me that one of the things that's happened in our culture is that we go straight to the politics to say we can change culture by changing politics and not realizing that politics is downstream from culture. So see, I think the desperation is already there in some areas like education, because all these people here, they're either parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, whatever. You've got kids, grandkids, great-grandkids, whatever, in some school somewhere. And the whole education system from academia all the in the universities all the way down is shot through with postmodernism, not a Christian worldview. And those kids are going to be running things in a few years. And if that does not make us desperate, then you know, what is? Are we going to wait for an economic disaster or a military disaster? There's already a disaster going on. And so my question to you was, how far along are you in this, and what are you seeing the people do in their community? How is it working when they adopt a public school or whatever?
For those who actually engage it, we get all kinds of supernatural testimonies of the environment changing in the school, of parents being impacted, and then we show them how to then, you know, we respect separation of church and state while they're in the school, but we show them how to then use the church as a drawing back to the kingdom of God. So we show them how to do that. So for those, and we've trained thousands of people now. So we have hundreds of schools that have been adopted. And so we're seeing this slowly move. It's a slow move because they've got to get used to this is a little different paradigm, particularly from a discipleship mentality. Yeah. What's happening in the culture, and you mentioned something very critical, because you know, education is a disaster right now. Right. And the Christian worldview is not only rejected, it's attacked. Mm-hmm. Then you've got the racial strife. Then you've got the political division. So we're getting a hit from every which way. And I think that's why more and more people are calling on hearing more about this worldview, because they're seeing just having church is not working.
Right.
You know, so I think we are getting to a tipping point of a crisis being so deep and us getting so desperate that the kingdom opportunity, the door is opening wide for that message to be heard and received.
One thing I've shared with this group the last few weeks and on our own program is I feel like in America today, the enemy has actually overplayed his hand. I think he's actually revealed his not only divisive but destructive, damaging nature. And I think he's revealed his ugliness. And I think common sense Americans are fed up with the ugliness of what they're seeing. Mm-hmm. The political correctness, the manipulative media, the deception, the academics that have absolutely no appreciation not only for our nation, our founders, for our history, for any of the positives, and no biblical worldview. And I think that the common sense people said, this is not working, it's ugly. Mm-hmm. It's destroying the economy. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
And don't you think this is the manifestation of the enemy's acts? But don't you think it's also God giving him room, because the hedge is down at our own choice. We are becoming reprobate in our thinking, and now the population, like the last verses of Romans 1 says, we not only do those things, but we give hearty approval to everybody doing them.
Right.
And this, doesn't that look like America? That's
that is America right now.
And so people are saying we've had it, and anybody that would say we want to go away from that, people get excited about it. But what they've got to realize is there's no president, no leader, no Congress that's going to lead us in the right direction if we don't know what the right direction is. And the right direction is what God says is right. What is good is right. What is righteous is right. What he says is correct is correct. And it's the church that has to carry that message. And even if you know what's right and you don't have a transformed heart by the power of the gospel, you're not going to live it. And if America does prosper like it looks like we are in some ways now, if we don't have a change of heart, the more we prosper, the more idolatrous we become, and we'll be digging another pit and getting right back in it. So there's no substitute for the gospel, and there's no substitute for people being involved in every area of American life.
What pulpits have, for far too long, have failed to understand the difference between the content of the gospel and the scope of the gospel. See, the content of the gospel is narrow. It is faith in the finished work of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of sins and the gift of eternal life. So we're good with that. Evangelism, let's win people to Christ, let's get them to heaven. But the word gospel, euangelion, is used in the Bible broader than just that. It's used in the Bible to solve the race issue. In Galatians chapter 2, and Peter's eating pork chops with the Gentiles, and because he found out they could cook, and he's eating pork chops with the Gentiles, and then some of the boys from the Jews show up, and Peter is intimidated. He moves his chair, segregates himself, and now there's a division. Paul comes in. Yeah. He wanted pork chops too. He comes in. When Paul comes in, it says, I confronted Peter. Now, Peter's a believer. He's a leader.
To his face.
I confronted him before them all. It was public. He says, because you were an affront to the truth of the gospel.
Yep.
He wasn't talking about how to get to heaven. He was talking about you're not applying the gospel in this racial situation. It doesn't take 250 years to solve a racial problem. It takes 2.5 minutes. If you're kingdom-minded.
That's right.
And because we're not kingdom-minded, we have seminars and workshops when there is a word from God that is definitive on this issue.
Can we see a miraculous healing right now racially in our country?
It will be a miraculous healing if it happens, and it will be because God had a church to work with through which he could demonstrate what healing looks like.
You've seen me put forth a lot of effort to try to contribute to this, haven't you?
You have.
Do you have any suggestions to make before the whole world, to me and all the people here in this room?
Well, I think every influencer should move to a kingdom motif, like you have.
100%.
So we've got to get this kingdom mindset in our leadership so they can pass it down. And then we've got to come alongside and support in prayer, in support the message going as far as it can go, to have as much infiltration as it can have, so that more and more people can be trained in it. Because you can like it, but not do anything with it if you don't know how to do that. And so we want to get our resources out so that people can see. Our biggest seller has been the book Kingdom Man. And the great fulfillment I get is all the men around the country who saying, this kingdom understanding that I'm supposed to be not just a male, but a kingdom man.
Yes.
That has lit me up.
Yes.
And this kingdom concept will light you up. And when it lights you up, you affect your world. Yes. You get enough people doing that, and every place you run into, you're running into a kingdom something.
Yeah. I just believe we're real close to seeing that kind of move of God on the people in this country who know him. And I believe people who know the Lord realize that we are walking far short of the power and glory that he says we're to walk and live in. And I think it's high time we step up and we allow him to be manifest through us and carry us. With all my heart, I just say this to you. I am available to you, and you know I mean that.
I believe you.
And you show me everything I can do to help build the reconciliation, the relationships we need, because I not only long for it, Jesus longs for it, and he prayed for it. And if he prayed for it, it's real important. And what he prays for has become more important to me at this point in my life than what I pray. I want his prayer. And I believe we can see it in our day. Do you think it is possible that we can see his prayer answered and we really have this supernatural unity that he prayed for?
Because God is on the throne, it very much is possible. You brought up a very good point in John 17 when Jesus has his high priestly prayer. He says that they might be one, but then he goes on to say around verse 23 this. He says, so that they will see your glory. See, that's what you wanted. You wanted God's glory, his visible manifestation to show up. But it's conditional. It's conditional on their oneness. Oneness does not mean sameness. Oneness means unity of purpose.
Right, and it starts with oneness with the Father.
That's right. One with him, one with each other, so that, see, we have one God composed of three co-equal persons. God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. Father's not the Son is not the Spirit, but they all make up the one Godhead like a pretzel with three holes. First hole's not the second hole's not the third hole, but they all tie together by the same dough. So they all have divine nature. So Satan's tactic is to create disunity because he knows the unified God will not be himself in a disunified environment, even in the family. He tells the husband, 1 Peter 3:7, don't pray if you and your wife are in conflict because I can't hear you.
Wow.
Because the unified God will not function in a disunified environment. So he keeps the church divided, he keeps races divided, so that God has to stay away because God can't be himself in that environment.
Wow, boy. See, you know, I get the Spirit of God jumps all over me, sometimes convicting me, but sometimes making me want to shout. Because, see, not only have Betty and I never gone to sleep angry. Now, we once went 3 weeks without sleep, but we've never gone to sleep. We took that so serious. Listen to me. We took it so serious. I can't even stand an hour of being out of fellowship with her. I mean, you just can't believe how much love I poured on her before I walked out the door. I mean, 55 years married, 4 years dating before that, 60 years. And she's so precious. And I told her, I said, Betty, there's no way to explain what you've meant in my life. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to tell you enough. I don't know if I'll ever be able to communicate enough. But if we ever get even a little bit of attention, Tony, I can't take it. And you know why? Because it breaks the fellowship that's possible with him.
Absolutely.
And I can't stand that. I don't want to lose that fellowship. If I thought you were unhappy with me, I wouldn't be able to go to sleep until I talked to you. And I mean that. So don't you ever get unhappy with me and not call me.
So you can sleep.
So I can sleep.
Right.
Jim, you want to ask Tony something? It's pretty good, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. I'm having to keep my seatbelt fastened here, you know. I'm about to float away. Thank you. You know, I read a book that the earth is the Lord's. And the author of that, I think you've read that author before, right? The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and every person who lives in it. And when Jesus the King came in kingdom operation, he didn't come out of a sacred place. He came out of the unlikely place of Nazareth, and it had a reputation. No good thing could come out of it. So too many times we write off the place that Jesus is coming from, because many times when there's the moniker, no good things coming from this source, the King shows up. And we must break out of this fact that there's a sacred place and a secular place. The whole earth is His, every person in it. And the kingdom calls us to love the people that are even enemies. And I think you have demonstrated that as I've known you through the years. And you've been a mentor to me personally. I just want to publicly thank you, because I learned from you as a young pastor in this city. There was a time I was young. I can barely remember, but I do recall. Now, talk to us a little bit about how we break out of this thing that the kingdom is going to come to the church campus, and that'll be the landing place for the kingdom. The fact is, the landing place is as big as what God created. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You hit on something very critical that has stymied the church, and that is this illegitimate division between secular and sacred. Mm-hmm. Since the whole earth is the Lord's, that means everything becomes sacred. In fact, in the dominion covenant, which God established in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 and 28, He says, I put you here to rule. We are to act as His agents, managers of what He owns. And He works through His management company, His agency, the church, in order to manage His affairs. Well, we're messing up His product because it's not being managed as the owner had in mind. And that's because we've got this bifurcation. Mm-hmm. The key phrase here is God told the church, I'm going to give you the keys, not of the church. I'm going to give you the keys of the kingdom. Yes. Well, we have turned kingdom keys into church keys. Mm-hmm. And that's not what the keys are for. And how do you know when you have kingdom keys? He says in verse 19, because whatever you bind on earth, I will bind in heaven. Yeah. Whatever you loose on earth, I will loose in heaven. So we're waiting on God when God is waiting on us. Yes. So we're actually holding up God from doing His kingly activity in history because we're more interested in the church than the kingdom.
Wow. Right. Thank you.